let's talk about siblings and conversations. What advice or tips would you give for talking with siblings about, first off, responsibilities, and then is there a best way to handle those both initially and then ongoing?
Yeah. Gosh, that is a tricky one. So we're three. I said 3.5. I have a half sister too, but not the one that lives the closest, of course, and not very involved. But I think it's understanding each personality, because no one's going to get any better. No one's getting any better with age. A sibling who wasn't very involved before, and I shouldn't say that, not involved, because people do get more involved, but I think just capacity wise. So my brother and I are a good example. There's three of us. One lives in Alaska and just has never been able to deal with that. So we don't involve her in the process. It would just clutter the system. And when I say system, I mean our routine. And we pretty quickly, we know each other. I know my brother has no tolerance whatsoever for any kind of finances, paperwork. I mean, he just tells me right off the bat, I hate that stuff, Laurette, you do it. And so we very quickly, I think having the conversation in advance is great if you can. Not all families can. So it is more of kind of figuring out who likes is not the right word, but who likes less certain aspects that are going to be needed. So kind of mapping out at the beginning, saying like, hey, I'm seeing some changes with mom and dad. Do you acknowledge them? Yes, I do. So I think what's going to happen is these are going to be the needs. And I think in those types of conversations, that's where, again, a geriatric care manager could be really useful, because it takes away the personal, this is what I'm seeing. And then a sibling may say, well, I don't see that. There's a lot of levels of denial that go on, depending on the relationship that sibling had with the parent. Some can take it better than others. Some don't want to hear anything. So everyone kind of has their own approach. So I think if you can have those conversations, getting a third party in, and geriatric care managers, sometimes you just, you pay them I did it with my father just to do an assessment. And that gave us a very objective tool to actually use with the three of us, to say, listen, I'm older sister Laurette, who has a tendency of being older sister Laurette, isn't saying mom and dad need help. This is actually an outside person who is coming in, who's been in this field and is saying mom and dad need help. And this is what they're telling us should happen. They should have a caregiver a couple of days a week. They should make some changes to the home and put in safety rails. They should go to a senior center. They should, whatever those recommendations are, and they're just recommendations, but then either the family can take that and hopefully agree amongst themselves, or have somebody, it could be a geriatric care manager or a social worker therapist, that can help them navigate, well, what does that mean? And what can everyone do? What can everyone's role be in this? I have cousins, there's 7 kids. And that's, you'd think, a lot to manage one person, but it's almost too much and too little, because they have to figure out what the right components are. You need a person that's going to deal with the admin. You need a person that's going to deal with the medical. You need a person that's going to deal with the environment. So they figured it out, but I think they're only utilizing 3 to 4 members of that very, very large family. So, and it took a lot of work for them to get there, because it's an uncomfortable conversation. And there's a lot of resentment from people. Well, why do I have to do it all? Why aren't you getting off your, what, and figuring out even geographically who's closer. So the person that's closer may be the one that's providing more hands-on. And then the important thing is to find something for that other person to do, if they can and are able to do it. So maybe so kind of doling out, like, can you help on the admin side? A lot of communication.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's A lot of discussion. Everything you brought up was excellent. I don't know if I have anything to add to that. It was, there's a lot of thought that has to go into it, and all great points. So we know that we're talking mostly family caregivers here. Uh, Certainly there are hired caregivers, as you know, because you worked helping place those folks. When people are initially diagnosed and then they're given prognosis, and I'm speaking personally, and I know this is obviously magnified millions and millions and millions of times around the country and around the world. You have cancer, or you have Alzheimer's, or you have systemic scleroderma like my mom, or you have MS. There's so many different, obviously endless. And people are given, this is the treatment, you decide what, and everything we've been talking about. And then there's a prognosis. Some people want to know, other people don't want to know. They just want to remain in whatever world and that's their prerogative. It's their life. They get to choose. As much as it may challenge the people trying to help them in ways.
Right.
So let's talk about prognosis, treatment, and then treatment goes well. There's a new prognosis. And so you've been preparing for the end sometimes, or been preparing for the next stage of, oh my God, here we go. What have you seen? And I've experienced this. There's a change. And so then you're changing not only expectations, it's how does that change how a person lives, how a family communicates, so many things.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I mean, just this week, we were dealing with it in my family, where my brother is like, I came home and mom, I said, hey mom, let's get up and play some Scrabble. And she got up and played Scrabble, and he came into the kitchen and almost fainted. He said, I thought I was saying goodbye to her an hour ago. Well, you were out, I took a little break. And it was just this microcosm, right? These last couple of weeks. But he expressed, he said, it was an emotional roller coaster for me, and I think it is. And the other thing I joke around, because you have a sense of humor in this, otherwise it can't all be but I've been spending all this time with my mother, recognizing she's close to the someday, as I call it. And a little bit before this, she said to me, I think someone said, well, how long are you gonna, how long do you want to live to, or something? And she said, well, I want to live to 99. And I looked at her and I said, that's 7 more years, Mom. I got to go home eventually, and we were able to laugh about it, and she laughed about it. But it really is you have to reassess it as you're moving through it, because I know personally, I can't do this for too much, longer. So my life my stay here may need to be modified. Right now, I've canceled the return flights because I feel like there's a lot of needs right now, and that we're getting close to the end. So I want to be here. But as things go up and down, and as you've experienced, sometimes you find out, yeah, it's not happening. And while you're overjoyed at having that person around, you also recognize, well, wait a second, what about my life? Where does that come into it? So I think it's a lot of just really assessing where you are. And once you achieve stability, and it's having some flexibility too, once you achieve stability, is say, okay, well, this is my time. This is my time to go back and wait. Sometimes it is a waiting game. Wait until the next shoe drops and come back here. So I think as you see things stabilizing, you as the caregiver have to make those adjustments and be okay with it.
That's the trickiest part, what you just said, being okay with it, because you can make plans and you can do that, but there's always sort of in the back of your mind, like, okay, sure, I'm going to go this time. And as soon as I go, something's going to happen and I'm not going to be there to help
Right,
in that moment.
right.
So that was a journey for me and a process to get to
Yeah,
that point. And I've been much better about it this past year, but I think part was COVID, which put that on hold as well, to
sure.
be able to do that. But eventually got to where I was able to start traveling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because you can't put your life on hold indefinitely. It just doesn't work that way. For the first year, I was going to Burning Man this year, right? My friend called me up and said, are we still going to go? I mean, I'd never, gone. That's a whole other story. We can spend a whole podcast on that. But anyway, she said, well, are you willing to take the chance? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I want to take, because knowing the situation up and down and fluid, then I'm never going to book anything. And so, yes, if I can protect myself financially, sometimes I will, but if crisis hits, then I don't care about the money. If it doesn't hit, then I want to have that experience. And I was able to go and nothing happened. And, I came back and everyone was intact, except that I was very, very dusty. But it is being flexible and knowing that it could be interrupted, but if it doesn't, you've just given yourself a gift.
I had finally gotten to there at the end of 2019, right before COVID, thankfully, and I went to Europe.
Oh, nice.
So I got to spend 3 weeks, which was
Nice.
great, Paris and Amsterdam. And it was just an amazing trip. I got to visit friends who live in France and got to spend time with a client in Germany, or there in Germany, but we met in Amsterdam and I saw them both. It was just amazing. And then when COVID came, and I'm talking about this because I think a lot of people can probably relate to this who might be listening, so I have two immunocompromised parents.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And we were locked down unbelievably because my dad was going through cancer treatments.
Mm.
My mom's immunocompromised with no immune system. And so we're separated in the house. And I'm up front, but I'm doing everything. I'm literally wheeling meals to them. It's like a hospital. Everything, cooking, cleaning, laundry, absolutely everything.
Yeah.
That was for 9-10 months.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy making.
Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. And then finally things started to level out with my mom, and her immune system started to come back up because she was getting infusions that were helping with that. And this is one thing which I know caregivers can relate to, is when things change, whether it's a prognosis and it's getting better, you can't flick a switch. For the caregiver, it just doesn't happen like that. Okay, great.
Yeah.
You have to find your equilibrium. And okay, exhale finally, but it's not a full exhale. And it's like, okay, where can I step? And it's, it's a challenge. Here's a topic, and we're kind of getting towards the end of my topics, but this is a great conversation, and I know this is going to resonate for a lot of people. No question about it. And I know you're kind of dealing with this to an extent. I'm going to add a little bit here. So one is, when do you decide? Like, this is a tough one. Deciding to put a loved one, a parent, okay, they've got to be in a facility or they've got to be in hospice. It could be the combination. Or do you do hospice at home? That process is, how do you handle that? That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's so funny because I think going into this, I expected someone to be very clear. I expected someone to go to the doctor after she got out of the hospital and the doctor to say, well, Laurette, obviously. And I was shocked because what I realized is it's not clear. And so as a family member, and this is some of when I talked in my LinkedIn post about the gut-wrenching decision, because I had my mother's doctor, the nurse telling me, well, bring her back to the hospital. And I said, she doesn't want to go to the hospital. My brother doesn't want her to go to the hospital. I don't want her to go to the hospital. Why am I bringing her to the hospital? And I had to go, and say, no, I think it's time. So and people hate and I'm used to saying the word hospice. My brother can't say it. He calls it happy life now, because some nurse told us in her culture they call it happy life, which is a great name, by the way, and I don't mind it. But I realized no one was going to tell us. Now, assisted living is different, right? Assisted living it's a lifestyle choice. And oftentimes the senior themselves are really making that choice, unless it's memory care. And if it's memory care, you're making a decision because you just can't care for them at home. And it's, oftentimes it's just gotten to that place where things are really sliding downhill. But I was surprised at the hospice, because I thought it was going to be a very clear-cut decision. And it's one of the most difficult decisions you make, because it has that tagline, hospice, tagline, going to die. And no one wants to say that. Now, we were able to get around it with my brother by saying, I was able to say, listen, it's going to improve her life, because she's not going to go back to the hospital. They're going to keep her comfortable. They're going to give her more, more attention. And he's a little cheap. So I told him, and they give us free, pull-ups. So, but it was you become the advocate. You have to make that decision. And it's more than just, what's the prognosis? That's the scientific formula. This person has 6 months, but it's also the life. It is the lifestyle. It is how do you want that person to spend the next 6 months, or sometimes it's a year. Sometimes you get kicked off hospice. Do you want them to spend it in the hospital? Do they want to spend it in the hospital, getting pumped with medication so they can, or do they want to be comfortable at home? So I think it's the health, and that's the first time I really took that healthcare proxy a lot more serious. Before, it was just a piece of paper. And then all of a sudden I said, wow, it's not only a piece of paper, it's my ability to read what my mother wrote, but also interpret how she's feeling now, because that was written 20 years ago. I wanted to make sure that she still felt that way now. And without saying, Mom, do you want to die? I had to say, Mom, do you still believe that being in the hospital is not the right thing? And that's how I got my answer. So you can't go black and white on it. You have to go nuance, and you have to be sensitive. And it may take several conversations to have that, and gently prod around what you've seen in writing.
So I think everything we've been talking about is just awesome. I think it's tangible, it's actionable for people who are listening. It'll be validating for so many people who are watching. There's no question about it, which is great, because this is all about learning and helping people. Hopefully it'll help people who have not stepped into those caregiver patient advocate shoes yet, and help them get a sense for that, and give them ideas of how they need to go about things, which is the intent. So let me bring it back around to talk about, and have you talk about, what you're doing now. I'd love to hear about, and have everybody hear about, what you're doing related to the books to be, and also the geriatric care manager aspect.
Sure. So, and it's so funny, what is the best laid plans of, I forgot what the saying is, but I did not plan to be here. I planned to make a quick trip here for 2 weeks, go back to San Francisco, stay there for 3 weeks, come back here. Things changed dramatically. So a couple of things I've been doing. I mean, one thing I did during this time was I did get my certification in geriatric care management. And that's really what I was referring to before, is the adult daughter or son, whoever is the geriatric care manager, that's helping a family navigate through what to do next. So some of those difficult questions we talked about. The other thing that I've been doing, this happened during COVID, was this is Lola behind me. And I wrote a children's story about caregiving, because I just thought it was really important it's not just one person as a caregiver, it's everybody that enters their life that plays a role in caregiving. And I think young people play a really big role in the lives of their grandparents. And so the story was written for caregivers as a kind of a way of giving back and thanking them for all the things they did. And I wrote it with that intention, but it's also about acceptance, because Lola lives with 2 moms, and her stepmom is African-American and her grandmother is from Russia and Jewish. So it's about acceptance, adapting, and then learning how to make connections. So Lola connects with her grandmother by learning Yiddish, which is her grandmother's first language, and understanding that the person is always going to be in your heart. And that's why it's the song in Lola's heart. The other project I've been working on since I've been coming back so often is to acknowledge people like my brother, and actually Todd, people like you, who step in the role, and especially men, because it's not typical to have men take on that role. And my brother's taken it on 120% of the main caregiver. So the next book is called, well, I haven't titled it yet, but it's a caregiver superhero. And it's my brother, about my brother. But it's very much about those sons who step into being that person, and how much my brother has gained from it. I mean, how much I appreciate what he's done, but how much he's gained from that experience, and how much love and connection he has formed with my mother. So that's finished. I'm actually meeting the illustrator tonight. She's done the first draft, so that will be available on Amazon as well with Lola. So Lola's fictitious, although the illustrator says she kind of reminds her of me when I was younger. So I was a little bit of a tomboy. And this next one is about my brother, but also it could be you. I've spoken to a couple of male caregivers, and it's kind of funny. It's like there are many fewer of those, and really acknowledging and those individuals. And then the other project I've been working on is because I have a lot of interest in just my own self-care, but also physical fitness. And my brother always did a lot with her. I had encouraged him to get a certification, and encouraged him. He had been working with my mom for the last couple of years, just on fitness, just lifting weights, marching in place, just really strengthening her. And I had encouraged him to go and get certified as a senior fitness specialist. So he and I are doing it together, because I've always had an interest in that, along with nutrition. So I will be, if I can get through these final chapters, I will then be certified as a senior fitness specialist, which is nice for me to have, because it's something that I enjoy doing myself. And what I realized as I was doing it is I'm not that far away. So yeah, it's been a really busy and fun, rewarding, and, I mean, it's definitely sad and loving time to help my mother through this journey, but also to gain a lot of skills and, putting those into certifications that will allow me to use with other people. And it's been fun. I've done a lot of writing on LinkedIn, and I've actually gotten a lot of calls from people I know and friends saying, "Hey, I just forwarded your LinkedIn post to my brother because we're dealing with my father, and I want to make sure that we get the documentation in place." And that's been just very rewarding, and being able to help talk people through what's, as you know, and what you're developing is a forum for people to communicate, because it can be, I kind of think about it, it's when you're a new mom, sometimes, you're a little bit isolated, unless you reach out, and there's groups for new moms, right? There's so many, that's where you make your friends. There aren't a lot of groups for family caregivers that are trying to make connections. And you're talking about the same thing, you, in a sense, how'd you get your mom to eat? She's not eating, she's losing weight. What can you do? Oh, I developed this, I have the same problem, and this is what pudding, I'm doing the pudding thing, right? But I mean, it's kind of getting more of those, I think the more tools you have in senior care for yourself, for your parent, for everyone around you, the better equipped you are. And the more you go into the journey as, this is a journey, and we're all going to get there someday. And I feel very blessed that my mother knows, and your parents know, how lucky they are to have us. And that it's not about us feeling, oh, we're so great, but it's about them feeling loved, that they raised people who care for them and care for others. And I think that's been just really rewarding.
That's well said. I agree, and they share that with me, and so, which is nice when I hear it, of course. And I'm just happy to be able to help. I'm going to wrap it up in two ways. One is I'm just going to mention, now it'll be a shameless plug on my part, but
Plug away.
yeah, so I know we talked offline, and so everybody knows there's the 1 Day 1 Week blog, which I'm not really writing anymore for the most part. There'll be little posts here or there, but it's tying it to the podcast, which I enjoy much more at this point because I get to interact and bring up great topics. And but there's also an app that I've been developing with a friend here in Florida, and now also with a friend in San Francisco, and it is a caregiving app. So it speaks to what you were just talking about in terms of, your friends forwarded this to somebody who they knew was dealing. So this app will enable caregivers to uniquely connect with each other in both serious and fun ways. And I'm so excited.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. I mean, they're living longer, but the comorbidities aren't going away. So
Absolutely.
a lot of care, a lot of caregivers.
I'm so glad, and I'm looking forward to putting this together and getting this out there for people to benefit from. And you and I'll continue to connect offline.
Yeah, absolutely. Some good ideas. People you should also that are already doing webinars and stuff or on different topics could probably come in and offer some stuff.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Well, have a good night. Good luck. Continue with your mom. Play some more Scrabble. Have fun. And
I will.
And we'll talk soon.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. The primary purpose of the podcast is to educate. While guests are invited to listen, listeners acknowledge that they are not being provided professional advice from the podcast or any guests. 1 Day 1 Week and its sponsor, 17 Commerce LLC, expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use the podcast episodes or the information presented in the episodes.